So I saw the 1517 to Paris today, and I have a lot to say about it. A lot that I didn't think I would ever say about this film, or any film in general for that matter. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to start by reading the description on IMDb, very brief, so let's do this. Um, Three Americans discover a terrorist plot aboard a train while in France. Now, as many of you know, this is a true story adapted to the big screen by Clint Eastwood. Where can you go wrong there? And I gotta say right now, I am a big Clint Eastwood fan. Got plenty of his films on video. Big fan of him. I've always found him very entertaining, and I think he's a quality filmmaker. So, hearing a lot of people say this movie was bad broke my heart a little bit. I was kind of excited for this one. And then I heard that he actually cast the real life people who stopped this terrorist attack to play the guys in the movie. And I thought to myself, well, geez. If they didn't have any acting experience, I can see why the movie wouldn't be so good. And that was apparently the case. They didn't. And this movie's bad. You've probably heard a lot about this movie being not so good, one of the worst movies of the year so far, bafflingly terrible. And believe it, this movie's really bad. Like, so bad I can't even wrap my head around it. And it does not just stop at the acting. A lot of it has to do with Clint Eastwood's direction. Apparently, on set, when these actors, they're not actors of course, were asking Eastwood for direction, what should they do since they didn't really have any experience, all Eastwood said was just do it like you did in real life. Just play it out as accurately as you did, as accurately as possible to how it really happened. And the thing is, with a lot of these based on a true story movies, and just a lot of based on this, based on that, based on a comic book, based on a book, whatever, there are a lot of people who get really mad when something isn't accurate. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, or most Stanley Kubrick films in general, most films in general, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park, any film based on Lord of the Flies, Animal Farm, Hamlet, whatever you want to talk about, there's always going to be some sort of liberty being taken when adapting it to the big screen, and people wonder why. It's because film is a different medium than anything else. Accuracy doesn't translate to cohesion in film. There's a lot of fat that has to be trimmed, and some things that have to be added to give it its own flow and to stand on its own as a unique work of art. Eastwood's decision here to cast these non-actors and to tell the story as accurately as it happened is a risky decision, to say the least. And it does not pay off, because the cohesion in this film, the flow, the pace, non-existent. Storytelling 101 cannot be described in any of this film. It is honestly, wow. I don't feel like I saw a movie today. I really don't. And it doesn't even stop at that, to be honest. I'll get back to this later. But there are other things about this movie that don't work all that well either. A lot of other performances outside of the three non-actors aren't good either. They're very flat and uninspired and feel like they don't care about the lines of dialogue they're delivering. Sound mixing is pretty bad too. Sometimes it's decent and competent. Other times it is amazingly bad. If you want a prime example of this, for about 25% of the movie, our main characters are kids played by real actors who, again, aren't doing that well in the film. And there's this scene where they're in a hallway, they're talking to each other, and they're talking normally. They'd probably be speaking at about the same mannerism and volume that I'm speaking at, since they're in a public environment with other people talking, but their voices sound so low like this. You can barely hear what they're talking about, what they're saying. So much so that you can hear lockers being closed a few feet away from them, more than them. Lockers closing a few feet away from them drown out their dialogue. I am not kidding. This movie was put in theaters. It's a Clint Eastwood film. Man made Unforgiven and Gran Torino. Shooting for realism here. Not doing so well there. Or maybe you're doing super well there. Who knows? But there is so much in this quote unquote story. And I guess it is a story. It's a true story. But if you were to view it as a self-contained film, totally forget the true story element, erase the fact that this happened, and just view it as another movie. Hell, put it on par with other Clint Eastwood films. It is amazing how much filler is in this. How much things happen that don't connect to anything. Entire scenes where characters do not grow, do not do anything of interest, and nothing is done to propel any sort of plot in any way, shape, or form. A lot of the dialogue in this movie and the delivery of said dialogue is so cliched, so exposition heavy, and so flat and just overall incompetent that it felt like I was watching Birdemic. There are interactions in this scene that feel exactly like Birdemic if Birdemic wasn't shot on an iPhone, if it had something of a budget behind it. Of course, the audio and camera work isn't as terrible as Birdemic, but for some scenes, the acting, direction, and writing definitely give it a run for its money. Honest to God, guys, the train sequence, the whole thing this film is hinging on, feels almost irrelevant until you get to it. There are parts in the middle of the movie where we have to keep cutting back to tiny little fragments of the train section. Not because they tie into what's going on. In fact, almost always, they are sloppily transitioned to. They don't flow with what's going on in the film chronologically. They just kind of swipe back and forth every now and again. And it feels like Clint Eastwood saying, hey, remember, if you're bored out of your mind right now, which most people will be, there's something exciting about to happen. Just hold on. Remember why you're here, because you would easily forget without those reminders. Now, as far as the train sequence goes, which is about 10% of the movie if I'm being generous, how is that done? Pretty good, actually. And you can kind of understand why. A lot of what goes on in the vital moments of this train sequence, stopping the terrorist, are handled in a very suspenseful, believable, hard to watch but in a good way sort of fashion. And Clint Eastwood's always been good at tackling disturbing subject matters like that, building suspense, capturing a sense of realism. And it's obvious that these these people would do well in this scene because this memory is probably etched into their subconscious. And they can remember exactly what they were doing and the kind of intrigue and palpable anxiety they must have been feeling. It's a good sequence. It's done very well. But the whole film leading up to it, I dare say I'd give it like a 1. It's so bad. It is so terribly, unforgivingly bad. Maybe a 2. I don't know. I was like hinging on 2, but there were a lot of long drawn out sequences that don't lead to anything. There's an entire vacation sequence in this movie that's maybe about 30 minutes long that should be like 5. That is so hollow and vapid that when it was going on, my brother turned to me and said that it reminded him of a vlog, which is exactly what that sequence was. It was just a gigantic vlog of people going on vacation. My 13-year-old brother, who barely ever watches movies, said this. And he's 100% right. To anybody looking for a film with a competent structure, with good direction, good acting, decent storytelling, an okay script, dialogue that doesn't suck, avoid the 1517 to Paris like the plague. It is not for you. I will never watch this movie again. I will never pick it up on Blu-ray. This thing was a chore to get through. That being said, I would be lying if I said there isn't a group of people that I don't recommend this to. I said before that the train sequence, for the most part, is done very well. And I do feel that. So well, in fact, that it comes off as so realistic. It feels like they just recorded everything that happened. And I mean that in the best possible way, where I can say that about the rest of the movie in the worst possible way. And I was watching the movie at that point, and before that I was making fun of it. I was thinking internally about how terrible it is. I was so bored and uninvested and shocked by how bad this movie was that a lot of people in the theater were talking, and I didn't care that much. Anybody who knows me knows that talking in movie theaters is one of my biggest pet peeves. But the movie just lost me so much that I barely cared that other people were talking during it. But as soon as that sequence happened, and it felt so close to what actually happened, I kind of felt bad for making fun of the movie. I felt bad for laughing at the stilted acting. I felt bad for thinking about how awful this is and how I'm just gonna have a blast making fun of it, telling all my friends about how it's the next Birdemic. Because I was really reminded of the fact that this stuff really happened. And that these people are heroes, are courageous, brave, and should be celebrated. And it just made me feel like this really isn't a movie. Because if you were to view it as a movie, it sucks. It's awful. And Clint Eastwood, one of the best directors working today, has to know that. I don't think he set out to make a movie. And if you're looking for a movie, you want to watch a good movie, don't watch this. But if you're interested in seeing an accurate as hell reenactment of what really happened with these 3 guys, everything leading up to this train incident, then it's for you. Go see it. If this interests you, if you think this would be a good time, you learned something, I learned something, go buy your ticket, have fun, enjoy, because you very well might like it. That's what my parents wanted to do going into the movie. and they ended up enjoying it for that. So this is a weird one. If you are looking for a movie that is so accurate, almost to a fault, but really don't care about the filmmaking perspective of it, because like I said, almost everything about this movie is not good from a filmmaking perspective. The camera work isn't even that good. At times it's competent, at times a bit on the lower end. Then, like I said, this is a terrible movie. It's not for you. But if you're just looking for an accurate beat by beat representation of how everything went down, all the confrontations, all the vacations, the military experience, the times of people hanging out or whatever, that's all you want by the real life people who experienced it firsthand, you might like it. And that's fine. You're not wrong for liking this movie. If anybody calls you stupid, ignore them. They're just assholes. You have a right to like it, and I'm really glad that there's an audience for this movie. I am. I don't want this to be this universally hated emoji movie, wish upon type film that just has to be lampooned by everybody who sees it. There's an audience for this movie that I genuinely respect. That's cool. I can rest easy at night. I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan, and it's good to know that a film like this can appeal to some sort of demographic. It's just not most film buffs. If you're like me, you view film from a critical eye, and you have no interest in seeing things for accuracy, but more for a self-contained story working well on its own, don't see it. And some people may be watching this and thinking to themselves that if they haven't seen the movie, like, oh, well, maybe Clint Eastwood's just trying something different, and this is a new style of filmmaking, and you shouldn't just judge him based on your checklist and agenda for films. Look, I'm all for different films. Some of my favorite films are different as hell. I love David Lynch. I love Ingmar Bergman. I love Stanley Kubrick, the guy who single-handedly changed filmmaking. I get it. But you gotta know the rules to break the rules. This movie it's not a movie. There are no rules. It's just, I'm gonna reenact what happened. Those are the rules. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing inventive. Nothing innovative. It's that simple. If you're sold on that premise, go see it. If not, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So yeah. Don't hate on this movie. It's not worth it. It has an audience, and those people should enjoy it. Everyone else, just ignore it. It sucks as a movie. As a reenactment, it's pretty good. If I gotta give my movie rating, 3 out of 10. I got no other rating for the reenactment aspect of it, but from what I can tell, it's super accurate. So that's all I have to say, guys. See y'all later.